So if you take a piece of raw steel, right, and you heat it up until it's just glowing this blinding, I don't know, translucent yellow at like 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you just leave it sitting on an anvil to cool down at room temperature.
You definitely do not get a sword.
Exactly. You don't get a sword. What you get is, well, it's a useless, brittle, super vulnerable lump of metal. To actually forge a weapon that can hold an edge, a blacksmith has to do the exact opposite of what feels natural to a living organism.
Right. They have to shock it.
Yeah, they have to take that glowing, completely vulnerable steel and plunge it directly into freezing water or oil. And it's this violent, jarring process called quenching. The extreme, immediate thermal shock of that freezing liquid, it actually forces the carbon atoms inside the metal to, like, trap themselves in this highly strained crystalline structure.
It's literally traumatic for the metal.
Yes, that literal trauma to the molecular lattice is the only mechanism on Earth that turns soft iron into unbreakable steel.
And, if we look at the physics of that exact moment, the rapid cooling is what prevents the carbon from diffusing out of the crystal structure. It forces this phase transformation from what metallurgists call austenite into martensite.
Martensite, yeah.
Yeah, and martensite is incredibly hard. But the defining characteristic of this whole transformation is that the metal has no choice but to endure a sudden, catastrophic drop in temperature. I mean, without the freezing cold, the sword simply cannot exist as a functional tool.
It's just a concept.
Exactly. It remains a concept to shape, but never a durable reality.
Which I think brings us perfectly to the psychological equivalent of that exact process. Today, we are exploring a blueprint for how to build genuinely unbreakable inner strength. Because, let's be honest, we all need it right now.
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking at how to elevate our character, our resilience, in an era where the psychological temperature just seems to constantly be dropping. The pressure, it never really turns off.
It really doesn't.
So the focal point for this deep dive is a really powerful piece of source material. It's a modern original poem titled Frost into Sword, or in the original phrasing, Shuang Cheng Jian. And it's written by a creator who goes by the pen name Poetic Mindfulness, or Yaozhi Tianni.
And I just have to say, it is an extraordinary text, mostly because of the deliberate friction it creates between its structure and its substance.
Right.
Poetic Mindfulness consciously chose to house this very contemporary philosophy inside a classical Chinese 7-character regulated verse.
The Qilu form, right?
Exactly, Qilu. It's a highly demanding, highly structured poetic form where every single line must adhere to strict tonal patterns, parallel phrasing, and these really complex rhyme schemes.
Okay, wait, let's unpack this right out of the gate, because we need to establish a very crucial rule for this deep dive. I'm going to call it the not an ancient ghost rule.
I love that.
Because look, when you hear the phrase classical Chinese 7-character verse, your brain immediately defaults to a very specific, totally romanticized image.
Oh, completely.
You picture this ancient hermit sage from 1,000 years ago, wearing flowing robes, living in a misty mountain temple, grinding ink and writing with a calligraphy brush by candlelight.
Right, and I'm going to step in right here and be incredibly emphatic about this. Poetic Mindfulness is a living, breathing, contemporary creator.
Thank you. Yes.
They are not a historical figure from the Tang or Song dynasty. They are not an ancient hermit. They are definitely not fossilized ashes sitting in an urn somewhere.
Not a museum piece.
No. Nor are they some long-dead poet whose wisdom we are unearthing from a tomb. This is a person alive today, breathing the same air, navigating the exact same modern complexities that we are.
The exact same algorithmic digital overload.
Yes. The digital noise, the global economic anxieties, they are actively creating right now in this modern world.
I'm so glad we established that context.
Yeah.
Because it entirely changes the dynamic of how we engage with the text. If we view this as ancient wisdom, I feel like it's very easy to just dismiss it as disconnected from our current reality.
You just brush it off.
Right. You think, sure, it was easy to be stoic when your biggest distraction was, like, a loud bird outside your temple.
Right. Try doing that with a smartphone.
Exactly. Try maintaining inner peace when your phone is delivering 20 push notifications a minute about the collapsing economy. But knowing the author is a contemporary individual means this isn't a dusty lecture on historical literature.
No, it's not about deciphering what a dynasty-era scholar felt.
It's a practical, living blueprint for modern survival. It's for self-transcendence, designed for you, the listener, right now, living in this hyper-connected, high-stress world.
And, the choice to use the 7-character regulated verse is actually a manifestation of the poem's core philosophy.
Oh, how so?
Think about the restriction of that form. You are forcing your sprawling, chaotic, modern anxieties into an incredibly tight, disciplined, uncompromising geometric structure.
Oh, wow.
The form itself acts as a cognitive forge. It demands that the writer distill their thoughts to the absolute purest essence. There is no room for rambling. Every single character must bear weight.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. The constraint of the form mimics the constraint of the circumstances we find ourselves in.
Precisely.
So what we want to do today is extract the concepts embedded in this highly disciplined poem. Concepts like the great peng bird or the literal forging of a blade. And we want to figure out how you can map them onto the architecture of your everyday life.
Right. How does this actually apply to your career burnout?
Or your relationship struggles.
Yeah.
Or just your daily low-grade anxiety. Because to understand how a character is forged, we have to look really closely at the elements actively trying to break us down. We have to look at the frost.
So let's examine the opening line, which sets up the central dialectic. It translates roughly to, harsh frost and freezing conditions rely on perilous obstacles.
Okay, so the frost is the adversity.
Exactly. The frost here is the mechanism of external adversity. In our current reality, it represents the daily pressures, the unexpected life crises, the chilling reality of failure.
The economic downturns, the rejections.
The betrayals, all of it. And the sword represents the forged will, the clarity of purpose, and ultimately a sharpened, elevated quality of life.
So they're connected.
Deeply. What's fascinating here is the dialectic. These two entities, the destructive cold and the unbreakable weapon, are locked in a symbiotic relationship.
I want to look at my own notes on cognitive reframing here, because this concept just completely shifted how I view my own daily anxiety.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, modern anxiety rarely manifests as a massive fire-breathing dragon that we can just draw a weapon against and slay in one glorious cinematic battle.
Right. It's rarely that obvious.
It's not. Modern anxiety operates exactly like frost. It's a slow, creeping, insidious cold. It's waking up and seeing a flood of unread emails that all demand immediate attention.
The dreaded inbox.
Yeah, it's the subtle nagging tension in your jaw when you check your bank account or you read the news. It's the quiet self-doubts that whisper to you when you're lying in bed at night just staring at the ceiling. It's a series of tiny, freezing micro moments that over time completely numb your ambition and your joy.
And from a neurobiological perspective, what you are describing is the accumulation of allostatic load.
Allostatic load. Break that down for me.
So when you face a dragon, a sudden acute threat, your sympathetic nervous system spikes, right? It floods your body with adrenaline and cortisol to fight or flee.
Right. Classic fight or flight.
Exactly. The event happens, and then the nervous system resets. But the frost of modern life is chronic, low-grade stress. The threat never fully resolves.
The emails never stop.
The emails never stop. The economic uncertainty never fully goes away. So the body is subjected to a constant, slow drip of stress hormones.
And that just wears you down over time.
It gradually degrades your cognitive function, your immune system, your emotional regulation. The frost doesn't crush you in a single blow. It slowly paralyzes your physiological and psychological systems.
But, okay, let me push back a bit here. Because if someone is listening to this right now, let's say they're working a grueling double shift just to pay their rent. Or they're navigating a genuinely toxic work environment that is just draining their soul.
Yeah, a really tough situation.
Telling them to view their hardship as a whetstone might sound incredibly out of touch or even tone deaf. How do we distinguish between actively building character and just like romanticizing systemic suffering? Because I do not want to sit here and tell people that being miserable is inherently good for them.
That is a crucial pushback and a very necessary distinction to make. The poem is not suggesting that the frost is morally good, or that we should actively seek out abuse or poverty or unnecessary suffering.
Right. It's not saying go be a martyr.
Exactly. The frost is entirely indifferent. It is simply a state of reality. The distinction lies in our locus of control.
Locus of control.
Right. You often cannot control the systemic issues or the toxic individuals creating the freezing conditions around you. But if you adopt a victim mentality, if you just ask, why is this happening to me? You remain the soft, unformed metal. You just freeze.
You just let the frost win.
Precisely. The shift to, what is this forging within me, is not about justifying the existence of the frost. It is about surviving it with absolute psychological agency. It's a survival mechanism that prevents the cold from dictating your internal worth.
I see. So it's about taking the utility of the pain rather than just absorbing the damage. The pain isn't a random punishment from the universe. It's the thermal shock of the quench.
Beautifully put, yes.
We are actively deciding that the environment will harden our resolve rather than shatter our spirit.
Yeah.
But, I mean, finding that resilience, making that active cognitive choice while you're literally shivering in the cold is incredibly difficult.
It is the hardest thing in the world.
It requires a level of self-awareness that is really hard to access when you are surrounded by chaos, which, I guess, forces us into the next phase of the poem's philosophy. How do we find that clarity when the environment is just deafening?
The poem answers that directly in its third line, which reads, "A solitary string reveals true intentions."
A solitary string.
The phrasing here is exquisite. Goethean, the solitary string, it points to the fundamental, non-negotiable necessity of solitude in the process of self-cultivation and forging the will.
So I was looking at this solitary string concept in the source material, and I realized my initial understanding of solitude was totally flawed.
How so?
Well, we usually think of solitude as a quiet room, right? A physical retreat from the noise. But the way this works, it reminds me more of the mechanism behind noise-canceling headphones.
Oh, that's an interesting analogy. Walk me through that.
So, to eliminate the chaotic, deafening roar of a jet engine, those headphones do not just put up a thick physical wall to block the sound. They use a principle called phase inversion.
Phase inversion, yes.
Right. The microphone on the headphones actively listens to the chaotic external frequencies of the environment. And then the internal circuitry generates its own highly specific, perfectly opposite internal frequency, an anti-noise wave.
Right, and they cancel each other out.
Exactly. When the internal frequency meets the external noise, they neutralize each other, creating complete silence. So you have to generate your own highly specific internal wave to neutralize the chaos of the world.
That is a remarkably accurate mapping of the psychological process described in the text. The solitary string is that internal, highly specific frequency.
It's your anti-noise wave.
Exactly. In a hyper-connected society characterized by information overload, constant algorithmically driven outrage, and just the relentless noise of other people's expectations, you are constantly being bombarded by external frequencies.
Yeah, it never stops.
And if you do not have a solitary string to pluck, if you don't know your own baseline frequency, your mind simply vibrates sympathetically with whatever chaos is loudest in the room.
You just become a tuning fork for everyone else's panic.
Precisely. If we look at the brain's architecture, we have two opposing networks. The task-positive network, which is engaged when we are focused on external stimuli and actively doing things.
Right.
And the default mode network, which activates when we are at rest, daydreaming, or engaging in deep self-reflection.
And modern life basically forces us to live in that task-positive network.
Almost exclusively. We are always reacting, always processing inputs. The solitary string requires the activation of the default mode network. It requires you to deliberately cut off the external inputs so you can actually hear the subtle vibrations of your own core beliefs, your own moral compass, and your own unvarnished intentions.
Okay, let's ground this in a real-world scenario. Let's talk about maintaining inner peace at work. Because an ordinary person navigating a chaotic corporate restructuring or a toxic office environment, they can't just physically run away to the mountains to find this solitude.
No, you can't just leave your job.
Right. They have to sit in the fluorescent-lit conference room while people are yelling at each other. How do they access this solitary string in real time?
They do it by carrying a conceptual pocket of solitude in their minds.
A pocket of solitude.
Yes. It means isolating your core intention from the emotional dysregulation of the room. Let's say your department is missing a massive deadline. The frost is biting, and everyone around you is descending into blame and panic.
The classic workplace meltdown.
Exactly. The external frequency is pure chaos. To practice phase inversion, you pluck your solitary string. You internally clarify. My intention is to be a professional who solves problems methodically. I do not need to absorb the frantic energy of my colleagues to be effective.
You just hold that one note.
You hold on to that single note. The chaos is happening all around you, but it doesn't penetrate your psychology. You remain the sword, completely unaffected by the freezing air because you are anchored to your own frequency.
But see, finding that pocket of solitude creates a new problem. Inertia.
What do you mean?
Well, once you've isolated your intention and you're standing in the quiet of your own mind, you still have to navigate the frozen landscape. You still have to actually do the work, pay the bills, manage the crisis. And when you look ahead, the path is completely blocked by ice.
Right.
You cannot sprint across a frozen lake. That requires a totally different gear, a different operational speed.
And that transition in speed is beautifully captured in the poem's second line, which shifts our focus to slow, small steps beginning to bear the weight.
Okay, let's dig deeply into this idea of bearing the weight through slow steps, because I think it completely subverts how we are conditioned to view progress in the modern world.
Oh, without a doubt.
We live in a society that just fetishizes velocity. Everything is about the hack, the shortcut, the 30-day transformation. If you aren't achieving exponential growth, you're made to feel like you're failing.
Which is incredibly toxic.
It is. But the physics of this poem dictate something entirely different.
Consider the structural engineering of load-bearing architecture. If you want to build a structure capable of holding an immense amount of weight, say a massive cathedral or a suspension bridge, you cannot rush the foundation.
Right, you can't speed up physics.
Exactly. The curing of concrete is a chemical process that requires time. If you force it to dry too quickly by applying extreme heat, the water evaporates prematurely. The chemical bonds fail to form properly, and the concrete becomes brittle.
It looks fine on the outside, though.
It might look solid on the outside, but the moment you place a heavy load on it, the entire structure cracks and collapses. The slow, small steps mentioned by poetic mindfulness are the psychological equivalent of allowing your foundation to cure.
Wow.
True, heavy burdens, the profound responsibilities of life, the mastery of a complex skill, the raising of a family, they can only be supported by steady, unglamorous, cumulative progress.
It's the difference between a massive, sudden earthquake and the slow, relentless movement of tectonic plates.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
Because, think about it, an earthquake is violently fast, it makes the news, it causes a huge spectacle, but it ultimately just leaves things in ruins. But the tectonic plates beneath the earth move at the literal speed that human fingernails grow.
Which is what, an inch or two a year?
Yeah, an inch or two a year. Yet over time, that invisible, agonizingly slow movement pushes up entire mountain ranges like the Himalayas. The slow step is what actually changes the topography of the world.
And the tragedy of modern ambition is that we all want to be the earthquake, but we are terrified of being the tectonic plate.
Yes.
We crave the sudden, highly visible disruption. But lasting character, unbreakable resilience, deep mastery, these are formed through the slow, methodical accretion of small actions that absolutely nobody applauds.
And I really want to spend some time honoring the ordinary triumphs that embody this principle, because when we use metaphors like forging a sword or pushing up mountains, it's so easy for the listener's brain to map that onto billionaires, elite athletes, or historical figures.
Right, the highly visible exceptions.
We associate greatness with public visibility. But the true heroes of life, the individuals who are most perfectly manifesting the forged steel of this poem, they're usually completely invisible to society.
The quiet resilience of the everyday.
Exactly. I'm thinking about the single parent who is managing 2 low-paying jobs, making sure the kids are fed, helping with homework, keeping the lights on, and somehow managing to suppress their own exhaustion just to smile at the dinner table.
Right.
There is no press conference for that.
Right.
There is no viral social media post about the slow, grueling, terrifying reality of putting one foot in front of the other for 5 years straight with zero safety net.
Not at all.
Or I'm thinking about the individual quietly battling an invisible chronic illness, where every single day just getting out of bed, showering, and attempting to function requires a monumental Herculean effort of will. For them, slow steps are not a poetic metaphor.
No, they are a literal daily survival strategy.
Exactly. They are bearing immense crushing weight, and they are doing it with a profound silent grace.
Those individuals have mastered the geometry of survival. They have realized that the weight of life cannot be hacked, delegated, or wished away. It must be carried.
You just have to carry it.
And the human frame can carry an astonishing amount of suffering and responsibility, provided it is distributed evenly over time, one deliberate step at a time. They are the living embodiment of the sword.
So how do we operationalize this? If a listener wants to translate the wisdom of the solitary string and the slow step into their actual Tuesday morning routine, how do they do it?
Well, there are practical ways to do this.
Yeah, I was reviewing the source material's practical applications, and there are 3 incredibly actionable habits we can extract to build actual neurological stress resilience.
Let's walk through them. The first is what we can call the slow walk transition.
Now, I know this sounds deceptively simple, but I understand it ties directly back to what you were saying earlier about the nervous system and allostatic load.
It does, directly.
Because I often find that when I'm stressed, my biology physically speeds up. My heart rate increases, my breathing gets incredibly shallow, and I literally catch myself rushing to open my laptop, rushing from my car to the grocery store entrance, rushing while just pouring a glass of water.
Right. That is your sympathetic nervous system driving your motor functions. Your brain perceives the psychological stress of an impending meeting as a physical predator, so it floods your limbs with energy to run.
It thinks a tiger is chasing me.
Exactly. The slow walk transition is a deliberate biofeedback mechanism to hack the vagus nerve. You pick one mundane transitionary moment in your day, say the walk from your car in the parking lot to your office building.
Okay.
And for that specific 2-minute walk, you intentionally, forcefully cut your physical speed in half.
So you aren't trying to change your thoughts. You are just changing your physical cadence.
Precisely. You focus entirely on the mechanics of walking. You feel the heel strike the pavement, the roll of the foot, the push off of the toes. By forcing your body to move with extreme, unhurried deliberation, you are sending a bottom-up signal to your brain.
A bottom-up signal.
Yes, you are using proprioceptive feedback to tell your amygdala, we are moving slowly. Predators do not move slowly when hunting, and prey does not move slowly when being chased. Therefore, we must be safe.
Oh.
This physical slow step activates the parasympathetic nervous system, lowering cortisol levels and breaking the momentum of your morning panic. It acts as a physiological circuit breaker.
That is incredible. You're using the body to convince the mind that the frost isn't lethal. Okay, the second habit derived from the text is the frost audit. And I find this one fascinating because it taps directly into the brain's filtering mechanisms.
The frost audit is an exercise in applied cognitive reframing, typically done at the end of the day. You take a physical notebook and you write down one frosty moment from your day one difficult, frustrating, or painful interaction.
Okay, so I write down what went wrong.
But the rule is, you do not use the space to vent. You must explicitly label what sword-like quality that specific moment forced you to practice.
So if I spend an hour trying to fix a software bug and the program completely crashes and deletes my work, I write that down. But instead of writing, this software is garbage and my day's ruined, I write, this catastrophic failure forced me to practice extreme emotional detachment and the resilience to start over from scratch.
Exactly. And the reason this works is deeply tied to a network of neurons in the brainstem called the reticular activating system, or RAS.
The RAS.
The RAS acts as a gatekeeper for information. It decides what you notice and what you ignore. If you constantly focus on how miserable you are, your RAS will actively scan your environment for more evidence to prove that you are a victim.
Confirmation bias.
Yes. But when you perform the frost audit daily, you are reprogramming the RAS. You are instructing your brain. Pain is a signal for growth. Over time, your brain will automatically start scanning for the developmental opportunity in real time. You stop reacting to the cold and start looking for the edge it is giving you.
You literally change the lens through which you perceive reality. That's powerful. The third habit is the single string check-in. How does this function?
This is a micro-meditation designed to be used immediately before a high-stakes encounter. Before you step into a tense negotiation, before you have a difficult conversation with a partner, or before you open a potentially stressful email.
Okay.
You pause and take exactly 60 seconds of complete silence.
And during those 60 seconds, you are applying the phase inversion we talked about.
Exactly. You are isolating your frequency. You explicitly ask yourself, what is my fundamental, unshakable intention in this next interaction, completely independent of how the other person behaves? You anchor yourself to that single note.
Can you give me an example?
Let's say you are confronting a difficult family member. Your single string might be, my intention is to express my boundary with absolute clarity and zero hostility. You pluck that string mentally. By the time you walk into the room and the other person starts projecting their emotional chaos onto you, you do not lose your pitch.
Because you're already tuned.
You are already tuned.
The slow walk transition to reset the vagus nerve, the frost audit to reprogram the reticular activating system, and the single string check-in to establish phase inversion. These are profoundly tactical ways to survive the ground level of life.
Very tactical.
But, and here's the critical pivot in our deep dive, taking slow steps and keeping your intention clear is how you survive the grueling, icy terrain. It's how you navigate the immediate obstacles without breaking.
Right.
But eventually, mere survival is not enough. If you are going to truly elevate your character, you need a radical expansion of perspective. You have to be able to see where all these slow steps are actually leading you
And this is exactly where the poem shifts its gaze from the frozen ground to the infinite sky. It introduces one of the grandest, most expansive metaphors in classical Chinese literature, the great peng bird.
The peng bird.
The text reads, "The great peng bird will eventually spread its wings and ride the wind."
I really want to spend a substantial amount of time on this imagery because the peng bird is not just like a large eagle. For listeners who might not be steeped in Taoist mythology, the scale of this creature is almost incomprehensible.
It really is. The peng bird originates from the foundational Taoist text, the Zhuangzi, specifically the opening chapter titled Free and Easy Wandering.
Okay.
Zhuangzi describes a massive fish in the Northern Ocean named kun, whose size is unknown. It spans thousands of miles.
Yeah.
This fish transforms into the bird peng. The text says that when the peng bird rouses itself and flies, its wings are like clouds hanging from the sky.
Just unimaginably massive.
So massive that it cannot simply flap its wings to take off from a tree. It requires a journey of thousands of miles just to build momentum, and it must wait for massive, violent cyclones, typhoons of thermal energy, to carry it up to a height of 90,000 light into the stratosphere.
Okay, so why does a highly disciplined, modern poem about individual gritty resilience suddenly invoke a cosmic bird of this magnitude? What does the peng bird actually represent for a modern individual sitting in a cubicle, staring at a spreadsheet, feeling trapped in the frost?
It represents the vital necessity of expanding your developmental framework. If we connect this to the bigger picture of modern developmental psychology, specifically Robert Kegan's theory of adult development, there's a concept called the subject-object shift.
The subject-object shift.
Yes. When you are stuck in a problem, when you are freezing in the frost, you are the subject of that problem. The problem is your entire world. You cannot see past it.
You're just drowning in it.
Exactly. The peng bird represents the ultimate subject-object shift. It is the capacity to zoom out so far that the chaotic, violent turbulence of your life is no longer something that is battering you, but rather the very thermal draft that you are riding.
That is a staggering reframing. The turbulence is the lift. Because the bird is so massive, it requires the violent storm to gain altitude. If the air was calm and peaceful, the peng bird would be grounded.
Precisely. A mature personality, one that has endured the forging of the sword and adopted the peng bird's vast perspective, recognizes that the chaos, the friction, and the frost of life are not interruptions to the journey. They are the thermodynamic engine of the journey.
Wow.
But you can only harness that energy if your wingspan, your psychological framework, is wide enough to catch it. If your perspective is small and localized, the turbulence of a lost job or a broken relationship just knocks you out of the sky.
You just crash.
But if your perspective is vast, you recognize the turbulence as the exact force required to elevate you to the next stage of your life.
I want to pause the analysis right here. I want to drop the usual energetic host tone for a second. I want to speak directly to you, the person listening to this right now, wherever you are.
Yeah.
Maybe you're sitting in gridlock traffic on your commute, gripping the steering wheel and feeling this deep sense of stagnation. Maybe you're folding laundry, dreading an impossible, stressful task you have to face tomorrow morning. Or maybe you're in a season of life where you feel profoundly stuck, feeling like you are freezing in the frost we've been dissecting, and your slow, agonizing steps feel like they're getting you absolutely nowhere.
It's a very real feeling.
It is. I want you to hold on to this concept. The wings of the peng bird take time to grow. The fish must endure the dark, freezing depths of the Northern Ocean before it can ever transform. Your current limitation, the claustrophobia and frustration you feel in this exact moment, is not your final destination. You are currently in the forge. The biting cold you are feeling is actively locking in the molecular strength of your steel. The turbulence that is making you dizzy and exhausted is the thermal current preparing to lift you. You just have to hold your solitary intention and keep your wings spread. You are building the capacity for flight, even if your feet feel utterly glued to the icy ground today.
That is the precise emotional resonance the poem intends to deliver. Notice the phrasing, "The great peng bird will eventually spread its wings." The timeline is not immediate. The transformation from kun to peng, from soft iron to hardened sword, is agonizingly slow. But the outcome is assured, provided the integrity of the forging process is respected.
The peng bird gives us the vision and gives us the cosmic scale and the perspective necessary to utilize the turbulence rather than be destroyed by it. But flight implies a trajectory. Where are we actually flying toward? What is the destination?
We need a peak.
Right. The poem concludes with incredible, visceral imagery of a climb to a summit. But we need to be very careful here because how a person defines the peak changes the entire trajectory of their life.
Let's deconstruct those final lines. The poem concludes, trampling the cold mountains, proud bones reach the clouds, looking to ascend the peak.
Proud bones reach the clouds. What a stark, striking image. But it forces us to ask the ultimate analytical question of this deep dive. What is the peak? Because in our hyper-capitalist, externally focused modern society, we have a very rigid, universally accepted definition of what the peak of life looks like.
And it's an incredibly narrow definition.
Right. The modern peak is entirely external. It's landing on the Forbes list. It's securing the corner office. It's attaining a specific, highly visible number of zeros in the bank account, living in the perfect zip code, and amassing millions of followers on social media. It's fundamentally about comparative dominance, defeating your competitors, out-earning your peers, and standing victoriously on top of a socioeconomic pyramid that everyone else is trying to climb.
And that definition of the peak is exactly what this poem is, quietly, systematically dismantling. If you read the text deeply and understand the philosophy of poetic mindfulness, the great deeds and the long river rising mentioned earlier in the poem are not about amassing external wealth or temporary social status. The peak being described here is the ultimate internal victory.
The internal mountain.
Yes, it is the victory of surpassing the past unformed version of yourself. The culmination of the entire forging process is solidifying a complete, mature, and unshakable character.
So it's not about anyone else.
Not at all. You are not trampling your enemies. You are trampling your own lesser nature, your own laziness, your own reactivity, your own fears. The proud bones aren't proud because they conquered a territory. They are proud because they endured the freezing frost without shattering. They are the hardened, unbreakable bones of a forged sword.
I was reflecting on this distinction between the internal and external peak, and here is why I think this shift is so vital. If your peak is external, your entire sense of self-worth is permanently hostage to fortune.
Absolutely hostage.
The external world is chaotic, unequal, and deeply unfair. You can do everything right and still lose the promotion to nepotism. A market crash can wipe out your bank account. An algorithm change can destroy your social media reach. If the peak is external, the frost can absolutely destroy you.
Exactly. But if your peak is internal, if it is defined by the integrity of your character, the resilience of your mind, and your ability to maintain your solitary string amidst the chaos, then you possess absolute sovereignty.
Sovereignty.
Yes. No economic downturn can confiscate your patience. No toxic coworker can steal your emotional regulation. No algorithm can devalue your hard-earned wisdom. You become untouchable.
Okay, I want to make sure the listener has the practical tools to actually climb this internal mountain. We gave them habits for surviving the ground level, the vagus nerve reset, the cognitive reframing. But how do we practice this self-transcendence? How do we continually reorient ourselves toward the internal peak?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's present 3 actionable exercises to help redefine and reach that summit in daily life.
Perfect. What's the first one?
The first exercise to orient yourself toward the true peak is what we can call the Pengbird zoom out.
And how do we execute that when we're, stuck in the weeds?
It is about forcing a spatial and temporal perspective shift. When you are feeling completely overwhelmed by a localized problem, let's say you receive a deeply critical email from a boss or you have a massive argument with a family member, your brain's limbic system perceives that localized threat as the entirety of your reality.
Like tunnel vision.
Your focus narrows to a microscopic pinpoint. The exercise is to physically and conceptually shatter that narrow focus.
So you force the brain to process vastness.
Yes. The psychological phenomenon is akin to the overview effect experienced by astronauts when they see the Earth from space. Physically change your environment. Go outside, look at the night sky, and force your brain to comprehend the actual scale of the universe.
Just look at the stars.
Or, temporarily, ask yourself, will the contents of this email matter in 5 years? Will the context of this argument even be remembered in 100 years? By forcing your brain to process the literal scale of the cosmos or the span of historical time, your localized stress instantly shrinks back to its mathematically appropriate size.
It just becomes tiny.
You adopt the wingspan of the pengbird, and suddenly the unsolvable world-ending problem just looks like a minor thermal draft.
It doesn't solve the problem, but it radically alters your relationship to the problem, which restores your cognitive bandwidth to actually address it.
I love that. Okay, what is the second exercise for reaching the peak?
The second is the proud bones posture check. This takes the poetic imagery of proud bones reaching the clouds, and translates it directly into the science of embodied cognition.
Embodied cognition, the idea that the physical state of the body dictates the chemical state of a mind.
Precisely. When we feel defeated by the frost, when we are exhausted, anxious, or feeling like failures, our physical posture naturally and unconsciously collapses.
We hunch over. Our shoulders slump forward, our heads drop, our spines curve, and our chests cave in. We literally curl up to protect our vital organs from the perceived cold. But proprioceptive feedback loops in the nervous system mean that this collapsed posture actually signals the brain to release more cortisol and reduce testosterone,
Making you feel even worse.
reinforcing the chemical feeling of defeat and submissiveness. So the exercise, simple but profound. When you notice your mind feeling beaten down, forcefully and deliberately correct your bones.
You physically manifest the sword.
Stand up tall, pull your shoulder blades back and down, lift your chin slightly, and breathe deeply into an expanded chest. Manifest the proud bones physically.
Just fake it till you make it.
Essentially, yes. By adopting the expansive posture of someone who has already reached the peak, you trigger a physiological feedback loop that generates actual chemical confidence and resilience in the mind. You act like the unbreakable sword until your nervous system remembers that you are the unbreakable sword.
That is so immediate and accessible. Anyone can correct their posture in a split second, whether they're sitting in a meeting or waiting in line at the grocery store. And what is the third and final exercise?
The third is redefining the daily peak. This is a fundamental structural shift in how you evaluate the success of your life on a day-to-day basis. Most people set purely external goals for their day. I will finish these 15 tasks, or I will close this major sale, or I will get my inbox to 0.
Yeah, the to-do list.
And when the chaotic, uncontrollable external world inevitably interferes and they fail to hit those targets, they end the day feeling defeated and inadequate.
Because they place their peak in territory they do not control.
Exactly. So the exercise is to consciously set at least one purely internal goal for the day. A goal that exists entirely within your locus of control that no external force can interfere with.
Like what?
For example, today my peak is that I will not let a rude comment from a stranger alter my internal peace. Or today my peak is that I will practice conscious patience when the technology inevitably fails or the traffic stalls.
Oh, that completely flips the script.
If you hit that internal goal, you have successfully ascended the peak for that day. Even if the 15 external tasks remain undone, even if the sale falls through, you end the day victorious because you elevated your character, you conquered yourself, you forged the sword just a little bit sharper.
That means you can have a day where externally, absolutely everything goes wrong, but internally, it was a masterpiece of self-regulation and resilience. You stood firmly on the summit while the storm raged harmlessly below you.
That's the ultimate victory.
And I think that brings us to the ultimate profound synthesis of the poem's entire dialectic. When you reach that state of inner mastery, you realize something fundamental about the journey itself. The cold mountain you were agonizingly climbing, it was never an enemy to be conquered. The mountain was simply the medium through which you conquered yourself.
The frost and the sword are not two separate things. They are one continuous process of becoming.
Yes, life is not a series of interruptions to your peace. The obstacles, the numbing cold of modern anxiety, the slow, agonizing steps under heavy burdens, the solitary tuning of your mind against the noise of the crowd, and the vast, dizzying perspective shifts of the birds. They're all the same thing.
They are the forge of human existence.
To reject the frost, to constantly seek an escape from the pressure, is to fundamentally reject the possibility of ever becoming a sword.
And the genius of poetic mindfulness is using the severe constraints of a classical Chinese verse to prove that the most ancient mechanisms of character development are still the sharpest tools we possess for surviving the modern world.
Okay, let's bring the totality of this incredible journey together. We've covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by confronting the very real, very modern reality of our daily anxieties, that creeping, insidious, allostatic frost that attempts to paralyze us.
And we learned that to survive it, we must enact a radical cognitive reframe, recognizing that the cold is not a random punishment, but the essential quench that hardens the molecular structure of our steel.
Right, and we discussed the vital necessity of retreating into solitude to find our solitary string, actively using phase inversion to tune our core intentions away from the deafening noise of the crowd.
So we can walk into chaos carrying an unshakable pocket of peace.
Yes. We challenge the toxic modern obsession with speed and instant gratification, recognizing that the true, heavy burdens of life, the structural foundations of character, are only carried through the unglamorous cumulative power of slow steps. We honored the quiet, invisible heroism of ordinary people carrying immense weight every single day with silent grace.
We adopted the vast, transcendent vision of the cosmic pangbird, learning to utilize the subject-object shift to see our daily struggles not as impenetrable walls, but as the turbulent, necessary thermal currents required to lift us to a higher state of psychological maturity.
And finally, we redefined the very nature of victory. We realized that ascending the peak has absolutely nothing to do with external wealth, status, or defeating others in a comparative rat race.
It's internal.
It is the quiet, profound, sovereign victory of mastering your own mind, maintaining your proud bones through embodied cognition, and becoming a more complete, unbreakable version of yourself, from the harshness of the frost into the clarity of the sword.
It is a phenomenal living blueprint for resilience. And as we conclude our deep dive into this remarkable source material, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, lingering thought to carry into your week.
What is the question they need to ask themselves when they step back out into the cold?
Next time you feel the biting, numbing cold of a life challenge, whether it is a deeply frustrating email, a terrifying financial scare, or just a quiet moment of profound, creeping loneliness, instead of desperately asking how to escape the frost, pause, adjust your posture, and ask yourself, what specific edge of my sword is the universe trying to sharpen today?
What specific edge is being sharpened today? Keep that solitary string tuned. Keep taking those deliberate, slow steps. And remember that you are currently being forged for the peak. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.